Oh, good for you, Rebecca.
Hi, ladies. Welcome to ADPi Cooking Club. Want to be mindful of everybody's time. So we know we're going to have some other sisters join us. And so as you join, please feel free to say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're joining. We have quite an array of states represented, and we have some little people as well. My name is Rebecca Gentry. I'm the Alumni Relations Director Chair. So I'm a volunteer for ADPi. I'm saying hello from Houston. And we started the ADPi Cooking Club. Some of you have heard this spiel many times, but really as an affinity group to bring sisters together around shared love of learning and cooking or baking or all the things. And so we are just having fun, I think. And we are so glad that so many of our sisters have raised their hands to share a talent or just something they love. So we have Melissa Hamby tonight, and she reached out pretty early on in our adventure here and said that she really wanted to, among other things, share her love of decorating cakes and shared a beautiful photo. And so here we are. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat throughout this evening. So please feel free to list questions or tips or anything that you need to know, and we'll watch those. This is being recorded and we will post it in the Facebook group. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. Thank you so much, Melissa, for saying yes, and let's all have some fun.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for giving me the chance. My name is Melissa Hamby, and I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I came home to ADPi of Omicron chapter, Oklahoma State University, back in 1989, and it was a while ago. And I do enjoy cakes. I'm really excited about these cakes because usually the only time I get to do pretty cakes is in summer camps when I do cake decorating with kids at a school. I teach kindergarten through 8th grade science at a small school on the University of Tulsa campus. My kids like to have cakes that are special. My eldest, we did a lot of different things with her, but my youngest, I had to do tombstone cakes with all the characters in Marvel Universe who died in Infinity War, or in Endgame, sorry. And this year it was a crime scene cake. So, it's not quite as pretty. So as we go through this, in the little resource guide, I gave you some websites that I like to use to help with things. But there's a couple of things I've learned, and some of them I don't know where they came from. One thing I put on there, the cake I made layer cake that is a 6-inch, and I can't describe to you what it is about a 6-inch cake that just really makes my day, but it really does. So what I've done is I have set up this horrible document camera with an iPad. So this is my hand here, and this is precariously balanced on top of an oatmeal container and a box. So, we do what we can. This is how I taught online school in COVID times. It was with this, dissecting cow eyeballs and things like that, which I will not do a tutorial of. You're very lucky. But the first thing I'm going to do is Erin asked a really good question on the ADPi Cookie Club Facebook page today, which was, do you cut off the tops of your cake before I frost them? And I need you to understand, I'm always about the simplest way to do things. And for me, it's a lot harder to frost a cake that has been cut in any way. Now, I've hand cut a penguin out of a cake and frosted all around it, remove the extra, but that took a long time to frost. So I'm just starting from scratch here. And I'm going to say some things that you probably already know. And I think probably the most important thing I ever read was when you frost a cake, you want to put a little bit of frosting on the bottom to start with, if it's a layer cake, to make sure that you hold it in place. So I'm going to angle this down a little bit. I have 2 wonderful kitchen helpers at my feet who can't eat chocolate. They're very interested in it though. So if you see me kind of say like, it's because I'm talking to the dogs in my life. So I put some frosting on this, and then it really helps cement the cake to it. I had a really good evening last night where my layers came apart super easy. And that doesn't always came out of the pan really easy. And so if I cut it up, if I remove parts of it, it's because bad things happen when I removed it from the pan. Otherwise, I don't do this. So I'm just going to real quickly do a crumb coat. And a crumb coat, you're going to use less frosting than you would normally, unless you're not a frosting person, and then probably more than you would normally. But the idea of a crumb coat is just to give you a smooth surface to work on. So I'm going to really quickly here put my layers together. So I had my first layer. I put some chocolate on it. I thought I usually make homemade cakes, but I didn't this time. I bought what I thought was a yellow cake, and it was a butter cake, and it needs some chocolate to help it out. Just using I don't have a fancy cake spreading spatula that you can spend all money on. I just, a knife. These things work just fine. Some of you guys probably already are with your construction, right? My third layer is the layer that did the worst because it was on the less hot side of my oven. And so it kind of has a dip in the top of it. And I'm not going to really worry about that. So the rest of this, I'm going to coat all of the rest of this in just a real, not super thick layer of frosting because all I want to do is really create a smooth surface to work on. So I'm curious in the chat, you guys want to tell me while I do this real quick, what kinds of cakes you made? I mean, did you endeavor a layer cake or did you go with a single layer cake? Or how many guys have you guys followed my directions and just like frosted a box? Because like that's it's the easiest way to go, man. What do we have?
Erin and her family are making a 2-layer funfetti cake, which
Ooh,
sounds
that's
yummy.
fun. Mm-hmm. What else do we have?
I know that Barbara was making a lemon cake, which I was lusting
Yeah,
about.
I read that. That sounded really good. I saw that on Facebook. That sounded really, really excellent. What else we got?
Come on, ladies, let us know what you're thinking. By the way, I really want to say that we have a sister from the Galapagos Islands on with us, which I think is so
that's
cool.
amazing.
We have cardamom cupcakes to practice on.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. Then what
Lemon
we're going to do with
blueberry lemon.
what we're going to do with the frosting with the decorating definitely works with cupcakes as well as it does with cakes. And I can give you some advice about that when we get that far.
We have lemon with blueberry lemon filling.
That sounds good.
3-layer dark chocolate.
Ooh, that's my kind of cake right there.
We have a couple people that are watching and taking tips, of course.
I like that. I mean, you could just make frosting and just eat it only. There's no shame in that, right?
That is a good idea.
When I first started making cakes, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and we got to help make my mother's birthday cake every year. But we would do the store-bought cake and frosting, and sometimes we had to go buy extra cans of frosting. I don't know if any of you all had this experience as a kid, because my brother and I, probably mainly me though, would just consume the whole can of frosting, and then we felt pretty terrible after that. It was really pretty odd. There was no surprises for mom because we were just like, oh, we feel terrible. Okay, so I'm about done here because this is a little bitty cake. And, like if I were going to take this somewhere, I'd be more aware of how I'm just slapping this frosting on here. But I'm not too worried about it right now because we'll all be kind to each other. I know. So I've got my cake. I'm going to slide it under here. Got my layer cake. I've added the frosting to it. I've added the crumb. It's not totally beautiful right now. It just looks like a big old mountain of chocolate, which it's not, regretfully. It's not a chocolate cake. That would make it so much better. And I may take the camera off of me for a couple minutes here and just point it more at the cake. Yeah. And so now I'm going to have to start thinking about what I'm going to do to actually frost the cake. And so hopefully if you made the frosting, one thing I like to do when I make the frosting is I'm really been into the past like 3 years having multiple colors together of frosting. And so what I did was I made a batch and a half of frosting and I split it into quarters. Technically, I have 1/4 here. I have 1/4 here. And then I have about half of the frosting in one bowl together. Okay. So I'm going to color it. I'm actually going to leave one of these colors as white since I made a chocolate frosting on it. That white's a great contrast color with it. And then since we're ADPis, I'm going to do the big bowl purple. So I've got some purple food coloring here and it's the gel coloring. And it doesn't matter. Buttercream's very forgiving. So it doesn't matter if you use gel or non-gel, but the gel dyes better. And it is able to tint frosting more reliably than the regular food coloring. And I just order my gel food coloring off of, Amazon. So I've added a little bit of purple. Right now it's looking black, but luckily it won't stay this way. So I've got my purple frosting almost ready. And this, what we're going to do is a very forgiving kind of thing. So even if my mixing is a little bit off, it's not really going to matter because the flowers that we're doing are the perfect kind of thing if you're not very confident about decorating a cake. Like I said, they're very forgiving. I made my buttercream about an hour and a half ago. I'm thinking maybe I should have made it a hair bit thicker. If you start to work with your buttercream and it's not thick enough, you are always more than able to put it back in your mixing bowl and add some more powdered sugar. Or if it's too thick, you can play the game of adding a bit more milk, or if you're really into delicious frosting, heavy whipping cream. Regretfully, I didn't have any in my house today. So I've got half of the frosting right now is purple, right? I've got a quarter of it white, and since we're ADPis, I'm going to make the other part of it blue. So I add some blue food coloring. And that blued up really nicely and quickly too. I'm gonna still a little bit of white. I want a little bit more blue than what I have there. So I can pop that over here. I learned the coolest trick for loading up frosting, especially frosting that's multicolored, that I'm going to walk you through. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about the tips for a second. So when it comes to decorating tips, and I'm a very messy person, so I already have a purple frosting thumb. It's just a matter of time before I'm like covered head to foot. So this tip is a 2D. It's a closed star tip because it looks like somebody took it and bent it inward, right? And that's different than the 1M, the open star tip. And so they have a very different look here. Ooh, I'm going backwards here. Here's the beauty of the rosettes and the hydrangea flowers we're going to do. You can use either one for the rose and either one for the hydrangea. In fact, we could live on the edge, not really, and switch back and forth. Now, I personally like to do the roses with the 2D, the closed star tip, and I like to do the hydrangeas with the 1M, the open star. I should say, these come in other sizes, right? So, I mean, a lot of you probably are familiar with tips, but I'm trying to get my hand in the right place here. This one, we just lay it down on the counter here. This one has like a little baby brother, right? They have the same opening. This one's just a lot bigger than this one. So the size doesn't matter either, except that if you have the little ones and you're decorating the cake, you're going to have to do a lot more squeezing. So this is like easy, quick ways to make a pretty cake. And I'm a fan of the big one. Okay. So we've got our 2 tips. I could have 2 tips that were the same, and this would totally work. And they do make a different look, but they're kind of interchangeable. Okay, so I'm going to check in with you guys. How many people have their frosting made? Colored, I should say. Okay, sorry about that. A lot of you haven't made already. All right, if you need me to pause a second, let me know, because you guys, I'm just going to fly. Good. All right, so what I'm going to do is something super cool that I learned about that I would have never, ever thought about. So before I load in the piping bags, I want to set up a way to have my 3 colors of frosting combined. And a lot of times you'll read, like on websites, that they put a little bit in their piping bag and then another bit on the other side. But I saw on a website that I cannot remember what it was, a thing where you take a piece of saran wrap and you lay it down. And I think I'm going to move my camera a little bit lower. So it's going to be like Blair Witch Project for a second. I'm sorry. I'll move it down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my frosting down in rows. So I'm going to make a row of blue. And the word row, I really should say like a blue stripe on the saran wrap. Can you see that? I just laid down blue. It's not going to make sense yet, but it's going to make sense in a second. So I put a whole bunch of blue. I have a lot of, I always over make frosting, but as Erin will tell you with cookies, over is better than under. And now I'm going to take a row of white and I'm going to put it right next to the blue. And it could have been any order of your colors. It doesn't really matter. So I've got my blue. I've got my white next to it. I'm going to change my orientation because I think you'll be able to see this better. Maybe not. So I've got my blue and I've got my white. It just looks like a big slug of frosting, right? And now I'm going to lay down my purple also. So I just made 3 rows of frosting. Now, if you want to do a 4th color, you could, but I've got to tell you, there's a point where you can't even tell that you have different colors. And since I still have some blue in my bowl, I'm going to go back and put some more of this on here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of turn this into a frosting tube. I'm pulling up my saran wrap. I'm wrapping it around at the top. And then I'm just going to twist off each end of it. So I've got myself a little tube of frosting. It has all 3 colors in it, right? And when I go to load my piping bag, well, we'll get there in a second. We'll cut off one end and then we'll stick it in the piping bag. And it will already have all 3 colors laying together in a way that's a lot easier to load in a piping bag. Does that make sense? Have you ever tried to load multicolored frosting into a piping bag and found it frustrating? You haven't. Well, I have a lot. So this is just something I read about that I saw on the internet, but I don't remember where, that I thought was really cool. So I've got that. My other purple is the rest of my purple. I have so much purple left. I'm going to have a bag that's just purple, right? So now I'm really ready to mess with my bag. So I've got my piping bag, and going again with easy is better. I don't use couplers. I just will insert the tip into the bag, but I have to cut a hole. And I want to make sure that what I cut doesn't obscure the end of this piping tip. So the good news is if it's not big enough, you can always use your scissors and make it bigger. So I'm just going to cut off the tip. My fingers become very messy. I'm going to slide in this giant piping tip. And I didn't cut it far enough because there's some plastic up around the edges there. So I'm going to slide it back a little bit. And I'm going to cut it a little bit more. And so now it's fitted onto my piping bag, right? But I don't have to use a coupler. And the beauty of this is at the end, when I dispose of it, I just cut off this end, I put it in some hot water, and then I'm able to separate it later. I really do love our planet. I really should use reusable piping bags. This is really easy. That's my problem. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a glass and I'm going to stick my bag in here. And I fold back the piping bag to make a nice little repository for my frosting to go in, right? So it's on a glass. Too bad my glass doesn't have any color contrast. And now I'm going to take my tube of frosting and I'm just going to clip the end of it with a pair of scissors. So I've got my scissors here. I clip the end. I pick this bad boy up and I'm just literally going to put this inside of my piping bag. Like I'm not even squeezing it in. I'm just going to use the whole thing to pick it up and start to squeeze it down. I don't want to squeeze down too far right now because I'm not ready to start with it. So it's loaded in there. Sometimes, yes, saran wrap does poke out of the bottom of the tip, but it's not a huge deal if that happens. So did that make sense? So now I've got a tri-colored, and I can take a little piece of extra saran wrap that I have thanks to my cakes being wrapped overnight. And I can show you that when I go to pipe this, it's going to make these, well, that wasn't even in the frame. It's going to make these lovely multicolored flowers. Can you see that at all? No. Let me make it lower. 1 second, guys. Sorry about these AV issues. So I'll just.
Guys, ladies, I just wanted to tell you, so Melissa has 2 cameras going on. So you'll see 2 names that say Melissa Hamby. You can see her as a human, and then there's another one, depending on how your screen is. If you just have it on speaker view, you're just going to see her. But if you have the grid, you'll be able to see she's got a close-up of her space that she's decorating in.
Sorry about that. I didn't specify that. So you guys are probably wondering what I've been talking about when I say some of these things, right? So if you look on the other one that says my name, but isn't me, and I think I can pin this for a second, but it's blurry. Can you see that now? The multicolored flowers. And I don't know if you can or not. Is that a yes? You can see it? What is the trick to the flower sticking to the cake? We're going to come to that in just a minute, I promise. Okay. It's a great question. Okay. In the meantime, I need to load my purple also, right? So I'm going to take my other bag and I'm going to go ahead and put my other tip in it. You can see it, but now it's too up close. I'm going to have to back the camera out.
Melissa, there's a couple of
Yes.
questions about what should the consistency of the icing be like?
So the frosting, you want it to be stiff enough that well, if you follow just the directions, it should be stiff enough on its own. You shouldn't have to add anything to it. Like I usually use a stick of butter and a pound of powdered sugar, which is about 3.5 cups, and maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons of milk. The main thing is after you beat it, when you pick the beaters up out of the bowl, let me unpin this. What should happen is that your frosting should be able to stick to the beaters without dripping off at all. Okay. But you don't want it so stiff that it's not tasty or that it dries too fast. So just a normal one will work. That will work. Uh-oh. Little iPad issue there. Sorry about that. We've got some lovely flowers on the iPad right now. Well, let me tell you, Rebecca, my iPad just left the meeting because I dropped it onto some frosting. So we're just going to go on with it with the laptop only. So we'll get to those flowers sticking on the frosting consistency, like mine right here. If we look at it, it looks like a mashed potato that's too thick, right? You wouldn't want to eat your mashed potatoes like this, right? They don't fall off the spoon at all. But any kind of traditional buttercream frosting you make, if it's stiff enough to be on your cake, it's going to be just fine for decorating. Okay. And you guys, if I give you weird like ways of thinking of it, it's because I'm used to doing this with kids, right? And so I have to be able to make it kid friendly. All right. So I've got my closed star on this bag. And to be honest, even though it's all the same batch of frosting, for whatever reason, my purple seems a little runny. I don't know. So one way we can make sure the frosting stays on the cake is by having that creme coat on. So, and not as far as it's sticking onto the tip, you may just have to apply a little bit more pressure to make that work. But we're going to play with it and we're going to see what you can get to happen. Okay. So I'm loading my purple. I'm going to change my camera angle. I like y'all a lot. I can't guarantee I really cleaned my kitchen. So I'm sorry about anything you see in the background. So I've got my purple loaded. And this is going to be the rosettes. So I'm going to pull this up. And I think what I can do is I think I can do this on the side of a glass, this glass right here, and show you how to make a rosette without even, this is going to be like my practice glass. Maybe if my kids are out of town, but if they were here, they would probably lick this off the glass for me, to be real honest. So when we make the rosettes, basically what we're going to do is draw a tight circle, and we're going to start in the middle, and we're going to work our way out. And that's not a very good rosette, but that is a rosette. Can you see that at all? Because I'm having a hard time seeing it. Let me go to speaker view for myself. No, let me go to, never mind, let me pin me so I can see me. It's one of those best laid plans of mice and men situation here. Okay. So again, I've got a rosette here. So again, I'm going to start, I'm doing this upside down, so bear with me. I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to draw a closed circle out and around, and that makes a rosette. The second screen did turn off because I dropped the iPad into frosting and it left Zoom. So like it's not recoverable at this point. Maybe at a later point in time, I can recover it. Okay, the good thing about practicing with icing is another thing you can do is you can always scrape the icing off of your practice surface. So like if you have parchment paper and you're really nervous about what you're going to try, or if you have a glass, you can scrape the frosting directly off of it and you can put it back in your bag. So it's a good way to practice because the frosting isn't set yet. And you can practice making the hydrangeas or rosettes as much as you want to. Now, when it comes to the, and this could answer the sticking problem too. When it comes to the hydrangeas, all you really do for them, and I'll use the glass again. Let me take the purple bag out of there. All you really do for them is you just push down and then you pull up. Push down, pull up. And mine are sticking a little bit to my tip right now too. So I don't know. Maybe I just need to push down and pull. Like I say, I kind of wiggled it that time. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually pull my little cake over, do some kitchen rearranging here. So I've got my little cake. And what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with going all the way around the bottom edge with the hydrangeas. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to turn it toward you as I go. And the beautiful thing about this is don't get hung up on, is it perfect? Because the reality of it is you're the only one that's going to notice the problem. So you can see I'm starting to get hydrangeas around the bottom here. At least I hope you can see that. I got really overzealous with my frosting when I got really far around here. I didn't center my cake. So I've got my hydrangeas going on, and I'm going to finish going around my cake with them. And if I wanted them to be smaller, I would just use a smaller tip, right? But I chose a bigger tip. Now, when it comes to the rosettes, I've got a couple choices. And let me put something, the cake on something a little taller. I think that's going to help us all a little bit. So I think the lighting's better a little bit higher. Okay, so I've got my bottom row of hydrangeas here. And now I'm going to add some roses, and I'm going to be upside down. I can't guarantee I'm going to do one kind of upside down, and y'all are going to have to just know that I don't do my best rosettes upside down on a cake. Give me a second. I'm having some technical difficulties here with my purple. So just like before, I'm just going to start in the middle, and I'm going to work my way around. And I've got a rosette, right? And then I can just choose to keep doing this around the cake. I can put them further apart or closer together. It doesn't really matter. Now I'll be going back in and filling in with hydrangeas. I can put some higher up. I can put some lower down. But as I go, I'm getting more and more rosettes on this cake. And I'm going to hide more and more of what the original frosting job was, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a couple up top. And I will pick the laptop up in a minute and show you this. Now you could choose just to do rosettes only around a whole cake and really put them super close together all around a cake. It makes a really, really pretty cake. But I actually like the cakes best that have some rosettes and hydrangeas on top and leave some of the surface smooth. So can you see that? Those rosettes on top? I started in the middle and then I just went around. Okay. And it looks like that took me a lot of time, but obviously that was like 30 seconds of cake decorating. So now we're going to move into the more detail-oriented part. And the more detail-oriented part is not hard either. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to fill in hydrangeas. So I'm going to do a little bit of work right here. And here in a second, I'll turn it and show it to you. And the good news is you don't have to work top to bottom or left to right or anything like that. You can just work however you want to within it, just filling in holes. So like I filled in those so far, right? And now I'm just going to keep going. And honestly, I'm probably not going to do this whole thing while we're on here because like you'd be like, I went to a class and a lady talked and squeezed frosting the whole time only, and we did nothing else. So if you want to work on your hydrangeas, remember with your hydrangeas, if you wanted to, you could live large every once in a while and make a multicolored flower. The rosettes with these work just the same as the other rosettes. So I just made a 3-colored rosette there, right? And guys, for whatever reason, my cake has a real strong lean going on, which is making me kind of nervous. I'm going to put it back down on the normal surface. I'm going to do a little bit of work on the top of it and then show you what a top could look like. So I'm just kind of like pressing this down and then pulling it straight up. The person who was having problems with their frosting sticking to their tips, is it still doing that or has it gotten better? All right, good. That's fine that you're only watching. The only thing you have to watch is that if your buttercream, if your hands get really, really hot, it's going to make your buttercream a little bit softer since it is, you know, buttercream. And that can cause some interesting things to happen with your frosting. So I'm going to pick this cake up, which is probably not smart. So I've been filling in hydrangeas, right? And obviously I'm kind of randomly going along here. But as I start to fill it in, you can see how it takes just a plain cake and makes it look more interesting. Now I wouldn't leave all this blank space here, right? I need to keep filling, but I can also give you a top view. And what I did on the top was I had the rosettes and I added some hydrangeas. And then I left some of it blank. And when you leave some of it blank, you can add words like, you know, happy birthday or cake is delicious, or ADPi, or whatever you wanted to add. You wouldn't have to limit yourself. I'm going to do a little bit more work on the top for a second, and then we'll take a look again. But of course, I would love to see if you're decorating what you're doing.
Melissa, there's a question about, do you recommend a tip for something that's not floral for if you're decorating a cake for the men in your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, the man in my life prefers pie. So it doesn't really come up a lot for that. And my father doesn't care if the cake is pretty or not pretty. You know, it really depends on what you want to do. I prefer personally, I always like to draw things out on paper before I do them if I'm not doing a floral thing. You know, just taking like a bag like this, and hang on a second, let me clean off the side of my glass before I do an example. You can simply make a border in a manly color, and the border, you know, you just take your icing, and like this is the edge of my cake, and you just kind of run it back and forth to make it look kind of ruched, right? And you can create a border like a seam between the edge of a cake and a cake pan if you don't have it out of the pan, or even just a line around the top if it's a layer cake, and then a line around the bottom, like in a color the man in your life likes. And then just use script, you know, just plain old write on the cake, whatever you want to write on, unless he has interest that, you know, that is something that you could draw. And here's the rule. If you can draw it with a pencil, you can draw it with frosting. It's really true. I don't draw with a pencil well, but I can draw with frosting okay. So that seems like a weird kind of thing. If I do one color, I don't use the saran wrap for that. If I just had, like for this bad boy, this purple, oh, this is not purple. Let's try that again. For this bad boy, which is purple, I just loaded it straight in the back. I didn't mess with the saran wrap. The saran wrap is really only if you have multiple colors. And you know, you could use as many colors as you want to, but there's a point where they just all turn brown because there's too many of them mixed together.
Great tips. Okay, we
Is
also
there
have
a
a couple more
substitute?
questions. Yeah, substitute icing for warm weather.
So I live in Tulsa, and you may not know this, but it's a little humid here. It's not like Houston humid, but it's pretty humid. And I have found I don't refrigerate the cakes. I leave them on the counter. Riding in a car, bad things can happen if you don't have air on with them. I found in general that if you're in air conditioning, a buttercream works just fine. Now there are different kinds of buttercream. If you're into whipped buttercream, which I personally am not, you know, instead of when you make whipped buttercream, when you cream the butter, you like cream it for 3 to 5 minutes. And so it really starts to get more of a whipped cream consistency to it. And then you add in the powdered sugar and stuff. And that has a totally different feel to it because of how the butter changes with that aeration than what I'm doing a traditional buttercream has. And so that might be better, but you'd have to like to eat it. And so you're really in warmer weather, even a regular buttercream should be okay. But if the car is hot and you forget you have a cake in the car and you leave it in the car, trust me, it'll have problems. And Aaron, yeah, your icing is starting to sag, stick it in the refrigerator. It's the hot hands that get it, right? Speed is the enemy. I mean, heat is the enemy. There are stiffer icings. And a lot of people like to use fondant and like coat it with a cake, but I don't know about you. Nobody in my life likes to eat fondant. These are great questions. What other questions do we have? So I'm gonna keep on working here. Now I probably should have used a color that wasn't purple in my bag to give a lot more contrast, but I didn't do that. Oh, the cupcakes. Yes. So on cupcakes, you can do the rosettes, but I'm gonna unhook for a second and grab something out of a drawer. I'll be right back. For cupcakes, a long time ago, I bought this from Pampered Chef, and I don't know what it's called. So I'm really sorry about that. It's this little plunger thing, and you load this up with icing, and there are tips that you can put on the end of it, and you put your icing in here, and you screw this in, and then like it plunges your icing down. And what it does, that's really nice about it is you can make those beautiful spirals on top of a cupcake, or even a rosette on top of a cupcake, and then add some pearls. You can also buy tips that are bigger than this. I like frosting. I don't think this is enough on a cupcake to do the rosette, but the hydrangeas, if you did them on your cupcake, it would be really, really, really great. It would work too. And Donna, to your question, if the frosting's too loose, add more powdered sugar, right? That's going to make it a stiffer consistency. And so that doesn't negate the butter in there. You're going to have some kind of a fat in your frosting. Some people use shortening based frostings and some people use butter based. But if you add more powdered sugar, it's going to be thicker, and it's going to be more resistant to that heat. What else? How are we doing? You know, Erin, my flowers are wilting too. My hydrangeas are looking a little weak right now.
Erin,
Uh-oh.
one side of her cake looks like a waterfall.
Well, we gotta, yeah, that's the thing where it's hard. It has to be thick enough buttercream that it really holds its shape, you know, but if it's too thick, then I don't have waterfall, but I have the Leaning Tower of Pisa over here right now. And I really can't figure out where my engineering went wrong. I don't know if you all can tell that my cake has got a lean going on, right? You can't really tell right now. But I do think the top of these look really pretty, right? And I realize that really pretty may not be the right thing for everyone in your life, but it's more fun than a tombstone. Yes, Jessica, sorry, I combined your first name and your last name. I apologize. I do suggest to always do a crumb layer. It doesn't have to be very thick. In fact, not very thick is better. But I do recommend always doing a crumb layer. And Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I'm used to, as a teacher, like reading the comments and talking to the kids at the same
You're
time.
great.
So
I love the multitasking, sister. Can you actually go over the rows again? I think some people would like to see that again.
sure, I can definitely do that. And Jessica, my maiden name was Vanetta. And so people call me Vanessa all the time because they would combine Melissa and Vanetta together and call me Vanessa. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get, oh, you guys, I've made such a huge mess in here. It is downright funny. I'm going to aim this way down. Okay, I think you can see the surface, right? So I can't really see it, but I think you guys can. So on the rosette, and it doesn't, actually on the rosette, it doesn't matter which tip you use. You can use the 1M or the 2D. So I'm going to do the 2D first, and that's the closed star tip. All you have to do is you're going to start in the middle. And as you press icing out, you're just going to gradually go out in a circle. Does that make sense? And that makes a rosette. So I can do it again with my 2D tip. I start in the middle and I go out in a circle. Or I can use the 1M tip, which is my multicolored one. And for that, it's the same exact process. I start, let me scoot this way just a hair. I start in the middle and I work my way out in a circle. And you can tell how this one looks a little different than these two, right? Since it's that open star, the middle is a little bit different. And for whatever reason, my purple that's in this one, it's the same purple, is really grainy. So again, I start in the middle and I work my way out. Whereas the hydrangea, all I have to do for it is pop it down and pull it up, down and up, down and up, down and up. And so that's really the difference between those two kinds of things. So this again was with the closed star tip, and the multicolors were with the open star tip. How interesting, Gretchen. We could be cousins. My dad's family has a lot of people. Yeah, Nancy, come on by. David won't cry too much. We do have some ice cream. The kids are gone. The cake's his. Did that help with how to make those? The circle? It seems wrong, but it's not. And the main thing is I'm gonna say it again, we're our own worst critics. And so if you just go with it, it's just going to kind of happen. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, it worked out. And if it doesn't work out, the worst thing you have is something really yummy there to eat. I am a little messy here. What other questions? Sally's Baking Addiction is a really great website resource, although her voice is very chirpy. And so I like to watch her with closed captioning instead of listening to her talk. She has a really pretty recipe that's a cupcake bouquet, where she makes cupcakes that are hydrangeas and cupcakes that are rosettes. And they're really, really, really good. Can you fridge your extra icing? Yes, you can. But if it gets really, really firm, it's going to be hard to use. You can also just, eat it out of the fridge for that matter. You can, I mean, how long does it last? If you're going to ask that question, I don't know the answer. I do know, excuse me for a second. Hey, out. Pardon me, I have a dog at my feet. We don't ever refrigerate our buttercream frosted cakes. We just leave them out the counter, and sometimes they stay 3 or 4 days. By the way, that's like a miracle. But so we haven't really had issues with that. If I could only eat one cake for the rest of my life, it would be chocolate with chocolate ice cream. It would be like chocolate sheet cake, but made in a 13x9 pan instead of a sheet cake pan, because it's like a dark, rich chocolate. And then it would have chocolate, not the chocolate sheet cake pecan icing. It would have regular chocolate buttercream icing on it. And yeah, that would be it.
We know your love language, Melissa.
I also like lemon cake too. And I don't mind a yellow cake.
Karen, what kind of cake would you eat if you could eat any cake for the rest of your life?
All of them. I don't know. I'm simple. I'm traditionalist. Give me a good vanilla cake and I'm happy. So,
but do you eat it with vanilla ice cream?
That'd be a bit too vanilla for me.
Nancy likes the German chocolate. See, I don't like the coconut, so I can't do the German chocolate. Red velvet. Those are dedicated people, those red velvet lovers.
Yes.
Ooh, ice cream cake. Yeah. That's a good one too. Yeah, with Jessica.
Like all the things, yes. I love seeing so many people like working away. I can't wait to see your pictures in the we'll post.
And I hope that your frosting consistent. Oh, Barbara, can you hold it up a little higher? I know you're working on it. Ooh, pretty. I like it. Yeah. Yeah, so Emma, that's a really great question. I didn't do very much icing on the side. I just did enough to crumb coat it. I made half of what I would normally make to frost the cake for between the layers and the sides. That way, it kind of gives the, first of all, it gives the frosting some glue to stick onto other frosting, ironically. And yes, it does hide that your cake is falling apart. That is the beauty of the flower decoration. Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong with the cake. And when you add the frosting, it can really disguise that well. Plus, probably July is probably one of the hardest times to do this. Although my mom's birthday is next week, and I always do her cake like this because she does like pretty things. And I just do yellow roses and like pink hydrangeas on hers. And it usually is a little stiffer than this. So, oh, that looks good,
Melanie,
Barbara.
I feel like Melanie's whole family is in this affair. Can you show us what you're making?
Okay, we are all here. So I'll show you the ones we finished.
Yeah.
Can you see them?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I love your hydrangea ones.
Thank you. I didn't know we were on camera.
Every once in a while, you have to watch it when you have kids in the kitchen because you'll find the frosting and they're like this. There's like right in their mouths. And you're like, hey, did that tip go in your mouth?
This kid
Get it
was
off of there.
busy. I turned around and there was a whole spoonful of icing gone.
It's a crazy thing.
He has a guilty face, I think. Is it yummy? Yeah.
The thing about
There's a song kind of ice cream that's my favorite.
what's that?
Happy birthday.
Oh, that's a good kind. All right. Well, does anybody else have any questions? I'm really good about time limits, believe it or not. I like to talk, but I like time. So I do definitely want to see these cakes. Mine's looking, my rosettes look great, but my hydrangeas on the side are kind of like, they're a little sad and droopy. And I did reserve some frosting. I was going to get fancy and write something on top. I guess I could go ahead and do that real quick because I did put aside a 5 tip, which is a writing tip. I'm not going to lie, I'm transitioning to needing reading glasses, and trying to read that number in there was a little bit of a rough ride for me. So just like before, I don't like to use couplers. I just slide this in. I've got some frosting left. This poor drinking glass has really been through a lot tonight. It is highly decorated, almost more decorated than my cake. And I think I'm just going to put like, here, I'll write a message on there and then we'll take a look at it. And so for writing with the icing, you just have to go with confidence. I didn't leave myself a lot of room to write. So I added a little ADPi cooking club on top of it, if I can get my camera in the right place.
I love that. Please post that in the Facebook group too.
I will take a picture of that with my camera, not with my laptop.
I think the only thing that would make this better is if we could all be in the same room and do taste tests together, don't you
Well,
think?
that would be a lot of fun. That would
we got to
be,
figure, we have to figure that out one day.
yeah, definitely.
So
All
fun.
right. Well, that's okay. The tips don't really matter, Deborah. I mean, if you're more of a design, that's great. The main thing is hopefully you got something out of this that's actually useful to you. That would be the goal. All right. Yeah, the multicolor color tip. I absolutely love the multicolor. I used to load them in, like you put a spoonful here and a spoonful there, but I was 2 years ago I did a nailed it camp with kids, and we had about 25 kids in there. And so we did a different kind of thing every day. We did pancake art. And I had a kid that was amazing. She was like 9 and she popped out of Kermit. It was unreal. Out of pancakes, it looked just like Kermit. I've never seen anything like it. Those are not yummy to eat though. But the part of the Nailed It, we did different techniques every day and we really worked on our tips. And, you know, I bought the kids different tips that they could use every day. And then we started doing the multicolors and the kids got super into it, but it was so messy to load. And so I just watched video after video after video about how to get multicolored ones in there. And then when I saw that one, I can't remember who it was somebody on the internet, but I was just like, I was just like, oh my gosh, mind blown forever. So I do think it makes it a lot better. Of course, I'm also easily pleased, so that could be part of it.
This has been really fun, sisters. And thank you, Melissa, so much for what a fun class. I think everybody's learning a lot and having fun, and their families are going to be having good treats. So
Yes.
This has been really great. Please share what you make and decorate. And even if you were tonight watching it, we hope you'll take a stab at it at a later date. I know that's what I'm going to be doing. But we really are grateful that you guys are really supporting the cooking club, and please continue to share your ideas. And I know Melissa has some other topics that she would like to teach, so you'll probably be seeing her again. We will post the recording and you can continue to ask questions in the Facebook group. But thanks again to everybody. I hope you have a great evening, and cheers.
Thank you, Rebecca. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Melissa.
My pleasure. I'm going to go clean my kitchen.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.